Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So I forgot to film a proper intro for today's video, but today will be a bonus video and hopefully there'll be a video on Monday as well. If not, I'll see you guys in the new year on Wednesday. But for today, I have a sketch already pre-done in my sketchbook, and you can see on the sticky note I did a little bit of thumbnailing and we have some swatches here. So the lovely people at Arrtx actually sent me 3 of their acrylic marker sets right here. So I'll be going through all 3 of them and showing you guys each set so I can use them all for a few illustrations that we are going to be doing today. So I'm not too familiar with using acrylic paint markers in general. I believe I have another set from Arrtx of their acrylic paint markers, so it'll be kind of fun to revisit with these new sets as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one. So the first one we are looking at is the 24 color Simp Tap acrylic markers, and these come with a brush tip, and like I said, they're 24 colors, so you can have a nice selection right here, and they're nice and vibrant and very saturated. On the back, we have instructions for the markers, as you need to kind of like prep the markers before you can start using them. The markers themselves also have instructions on the side just in case you forget, but let's go ahead and activate these. So first, you need to shake, and then we can go ahead and basically press the valve at the very top. I have also placed a scrap piece of paper underneath kind of where I'm prepping all these markers, because I might be heavy-handed and accidentally press too much paint from the reservoir to the brush tip. So you can see that it's slowly saturating the nib, but a little bit later on I get a little bit impatient and kind of pressed a little bit more paint. So you can overdo it a little bit, but just to make sure that the pen is super saturated, I'm kind of doing a quick swatch. I'm also going to write with the kind of fine tip portion of the pen, and then we'll press harder so you can kind of see the line variation you can get with the brush tip, which is quite nice because you can definitely do some detailing and fill in larger areas quite quickly with this brush nib. And the paint itself is very smooth and very opaque, which I really liked for these pens. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of do the other pens as well so you can kind of get them prepped for a bit later. It is also recommended that you hold the pen basically vertical or like upright, so you can kind of let the paint flow a little bit more naturally down to the nib. On the side, it has this nice little window so you can actually see the amount of paint you have left in your little paint marker, which is quite handy to know which of your pens are running very low. Next up, we have Arrtx's 36 color acrylic markers, and these all come with a brush tip. So upon opening the box, you are greeted with a little bit of a color swatch, but these are actually stickers that you can actually use to basically label your paint markers, which I think is kind of a cute touch. So you can kind of place the label wherever you want so you can view it on the pens themselves. So the box is separated from a upper tray and a lower tray, but I'll show you guys a quick close-up of the markers themselves. And you can see that there is not really any labeling for the color, so we are going to have to take the little kind of number stickers from right here and basically put them on each individual marker. And I'm putting it near the bottom just because it's a little bit easier for me to see. You can definitely put it closer to the cap or even on the side of the marker, so any place that you think is more visible will definitely work for you. I believe these markers are actually very similar to the other set that I had in the past, but I never really painted too much with them. But I'm excited about this set too, because I think this is going to be perfect for kind of like embellishments. So this is the metallic acrylic markers, and they also have a brush tip, and kind of similar to the previous set, you need to put on the labels for each individual marker so you can kind of easily identify them. Now I believe all the acrylic markers that they have work on a plethora of different surfaces, including glass, rocks, wood, plastic, ceramics, and obviously paper, which is what I'm going to be working on for the kind of first session, which was the kind of the sketch you saw earlier, which I'm going to be treating as kind of like my sample or my test. And then later on, we are going to move on kind of like painted boards or kind of like canvases. So we'll work on a different surface to see if there's any difference, and I'll talk a little bit about the different surfaces and how the kind of markers react with them, because I did find that there is a bit of a difference. But in the meantime, let's quickly go through the swatches. Now, upon first use for, I believe, every marker, just in general, especially ones that you need to shake up, sometimes there is a little bit of separation from the pigments or any binders and stuff. So just like kind of give it a bit of a scribble or a shake or a mix if you can, if you want to have like more of a unified mixed color, I guess. But for the most part, I believe all of these had pretty much no problem, and after they dry, you can see that they kind of dry matte for the most part. And if you build up a lot of layers and kind of make things a little bit more, I guess, like higher coverage, I do get a little bit of that kind of glossiness that you get from acrylic paints, which I'll show you guys in the first illustration right at the end. So yeah, here are the paint marker swatches, which I think has a very good selection of colors. And speaking of colors, I have pre-selected a few palettes that I'm going to try, so hopefully I can try my best to adhere to the color palettes, because with paint markers and this many colors, it's easy to get overwhelmed, so I wanted to try my best to limit the colors if I could. So for the first illustration, I'm going to be starting off with pretty much just 5 colors. I'm keeping the colors quite simple and very much tailored to the character, which I am drawing my OC Masaki, and we're working in kind of notebook paper, so very thin kind of paper. It's kind of more on the smoother side. But upon using the acrylic markers, especially the 36 color set, I noticed that it might be just my lighter colors in general as well, that it was having a little bit of a hard time on my paper, just because the notebook paper also pills very easily. So I highly recommend a paper that's a little bit more sturdier, or a surface that's a little bit less porous might work a little bit better with these markers. But the Simp Tap markers had no problem, and I think it's also because it flows out so much paint that it just glides so smoothly and very opaque. So I had an easier time working with these markers. But you can see that the kind of like lighter pink tone that's like right on top of the peach color for Masaki's skin, it's a little bit smoother, and I didn't have any problems. So the initial little layer I did with the peach color kind of acted as a little barrier from the paper to the next layer. So I was basically just painting on top of another paint layer, which made it very easy for me to kind of let the color glide on top. So there was less resistance and less pilling that way. So it was kind of smoother to use. But you'll see when I'm filling with the red as well, because I'll be using kind of this red color for the background and also the canned coffee for Masaki. And you'll see it kind of starts out very juicy, but then the paper kind of wears at the paint a little bit. So sometimes I'm dabbing the color on top, because it's still dispensing quite a bit of paint. It's just the motion of dragging it across my paper and the paper kind of pilling a little bit that it kind of creates a very dry texture. But you can definitely use that to your advantage if you like to dry brush a little bit maybe. But the brown and kind of like the turquoise teal color, it was very easy to use because it was Simp Tap markers, and it has a very easy and very smooth application, which I found it very easy for me to do a lot of the larger areas for both his hair, his sweater, and his scarf. So a little bit later, I am going to try my best to kind of layer up the colors a little bit. So something that's a little bit different from how I usually work with other mediums, I really like gradually building up value or kind of layering colors in a certain way that appears a little bit more soft, and kind of slowly getting to like darker colors or trying to make things bold a little bit later. But for these, I wanted to work a little bit differently, because I wanted to try making things a little bit more bold, including like my color choices, but also if I could kind of like block out certain areas so we can have like larger chunks of color. I was gonna try my best to do that. I definitely think I'm still very timid when it comes to something like acrylic markers. So maybe in the future, I'll definitely revisit using these and we can kind of try something a little bit different, because I kept kind of trying to keep things a little bit separate when I was initially blocking things out. But as I got more comfortable, I'll start doing line work, which we're kind of starting right now. And then after that, I will kind of layer up some of the turquoise into his hair. I added a a little bit to the can. We'll add some of the peach tone to his hair as well, and we'll add kind of like the red back into his scarf. So I'm gonna try my best to kind of mix and match the colors so it's not too separated, I guess, in terms of the colors, and I'll allow myself to kind of let that almost like bridge values together, or like colors in place of value, I guess, and if that makes sense, which it probably didn't, but that's okay. I think once we get on to some of the other paintings that we're going to be doing today with the markers, you guys can let me know if you would like to see more acrylic marker videos, because like I said, I would like to play around with maybe other styles and stuff to see what better suits these markers, because they are very fun because they're very opaque, very vibrant, so you can definitely get a very different look for your pieces. So I'm kind of excited to continue to use them in the future as well. But that's basically it for the little sketchbook drawing. I think this is also a great way to cover up some marker bleed through, which I'll show at the very end, just because the Simp Tap markers are very opaque and cover up things quite well, and you can definitely layer it up if you need to. Also, here's a little bit of that shining glare, similar to how acrylic paint just dries and has that more plasticky feel. Also, this is the canvas board that I'm going to be using, and I did my sketch digitally, so I'm going to quickly transfer it to the canvas by scribbling on the back of a printed sketch, and we'll go ahead and use a ballpoint pen on basically this makeshift carbon paper. So I have a sketch of Ike Evelyn done digitally, printed it off, and we're transferring it, so I have a little bit better of a guide to where I want to place some of my colors. I know the sketch looks a little bit too faint on camera, but it's enough for me to work with, so I'm just gonna leave it as is. So unlike the other one, even though I'm showing you guys 5 colors, I am going to be adding in 2 more colors because I got very timid in terms of not having a light enough color for one of the transitions, that I added 2 more colors, which I find unnecessary, but I don't know, I needed it at the time, but I feel like I could have made the same illustration with the 5 colors that I initially planned out. So kind of a bummer, because I would have liked to stick with my 5 colors, but because I do have access to all these colors, I just gave myself the okay to keep adding more colors if I needed to. So we'll use 7 colors for today. So for this one in particular, I did try my best to tailor the colors a little bit more towards his color palette, but they're not exactly the colors you would use like normally when coloring a character, I guess, just because it's not their natural color, or actually their colors of their color palette. So I am going to try my best to separate things between cool and warm, but also trying to separate things from their values. So I mentioned earlier that there were some colors that I did not need. I was scared of using the yellow, which is more or less on the right side of the canvas, as the skin tone base. I could have left the skin tone also just as plain white, since it is on the paler side. So instead, I did end up using the lighter yellow. I don't think I needed that cream or white color at all. So I'm not even sure where I used it. Actually, I can see it on the canvas. It's very faint because it's like around his neck and collar area. So it's kind of like the little collar and lapel of his jacket or shawl or whatever you want to call it. But I think for the most part, once we get there, I rely heavily on line work and line art, so I think that's what's gonna tie everything together. I definitely liked this look initially because you can see the kind of like highlights or the hair strands where they were, but once I actually end up putting that blue back into the hair, it kind of defines it in a very cool way, which I like because it looks, I don't know, a little bit different because it's lineless, but you can still see the form of the hair, which is kind of fun. But I definitely like the look of it when it has line work, just because of how I am. I do like having line art to kind of like fully finish the piece, if anything. And this color, I was a little bit iffy on using this one because I feel like I could have also omitted the orange, which didn't feel like it was as needed. It definitely provides a little bit more depth because of the value shift, but color-wise, I don't know if I really needed it. I think the yellow and blue looked fine on their own. I definitely think orange helps also bridge a little bit because I don't know, orange and blue look great together. I do like the contrast of blue and yellow as well, but blue and orange just, you know, it just works well because of the complementary colors. Also, I pretty much will always pick the Simp Tap markers to do the line work because of the flexibility of the brush tip compared to the ones for the 36 set as well as the metallic set. Just is a little bit thicker, and this one has just more control because of the consistency of the paint is very smooth. So I had no problems. I just had issues with my own kind of like wrist control and my arm control when doing the line work, but you can see that for the most part, the entire piece kind of comes together as I'm filling in more of the lines. I'm also darkening a lot of the values, adding line weight, which is kind of contributing, hopefully, to more of a bolder look. But hopefully, also, the color selection isn't too bad. I know sometimes I get colors looking okay when I pick a few for a more limited color palette, but sometimes I'm really off, so hopefully this one isn't too jarring on the eyes. I have two more pieces that I'm going to be showing you guys. One, I was really pushing myself to like it. I don't know if I do. And then the other one I am a little iffy about, but it was definitely good practice and fun. So yeah, I'll see you guys when this one is done. So now that we are doing kind of the final touches, after I did the line work, some areas I did go back with the kind of that more dustier, lighter blue to kind of do the shadows, just because some places just looked a little bit lost and washed out because of the line art being so bold. So there's some areas I wanted to go back and add more shadows, but this is kind of the finished look for the Ike Evelyn piece, which I actually really like this one. I kind of want to do a purple and yellow one and do one of Shu Yamino and give that to my friend. I know she doesn't watch my videos, so I'm safe enough to say this. I forgot I showed this here, so you'll probably see it at the very end, but this is actually the first piece that I did, which is of Honkai Star Rail's Hua Hua. But let's not talk about that right now. I'll show you guys a little bit later. But let's move on to technically the third piece. And I'm still working on the canvas board, so kind of similar procedure. I did do a very quick sketch digitally, transferred it by printing it off and then scribbling on the back so we can basically turn it into a carbon paper so I can transfer it easily to my canvas board. I chose the color palette before choosing the character, which made it a little bit difficult because either I wanted to match the blue and red to a character that's pre-existing, or I wanted to throw their color palette out of the window and focus more on, I guess, the contrast as well as the value. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to tell who I'm drawing, but I am drawing Fremine because I wanted to draw something cute, but I wasn't sure if it was going to fit the aesthetic too nicely. The intensity will definitely pick up once I start adding some of the midtones and once I actually do the line work in the very end. Right now it's just very much blue and pink, so yeah, it's not too much, and I struggled. I struggled to keep the values in places that made sense and contributed in a nice way to the form, as well as just defining things properly. So yeah, it's gonna get a little bit hard to see until I start to actually add in the line work, which once again, I'm kind of using the line work a little bit as a crutch in terms of trying to define the shape instead of relying on the color shift and the value changes. So I do apologize that this one appears to be quite messy until the very end, and he's a little bit lopsided because I could not see part of my sketch where his hand kind of meets his head. So I kind of lost a little bit of the definition of his hair. So he looks a little bit more squashed in a little bit. But I forgot to talk about the consistency of these paint pens. So for the Simp Tap, I had no issues working on the board or anything like that. It works so smoothly and it covers just perfectly. So I had no issues there. The other markers, so the metallic acrylic markers and the 36 color acrylic markers, work a lot better on the canvas board, I found, compared to the notebook paper. Now, I'm sure if you use other paper that's a little bit less porous, or I don't know, maybe of a higher quality, it might work more smoother than the notebook paper that I was using. So hopefully that's the case, because I do like the color range of these markers. They have pretty good coverage, and if you have troubles with a lot of streaking and stuff, you can definitely do a few layers if you wanted to. But I don't know, I never really work in this kind of way, so it was kind of fun to learn how to adjust my style a little bit to kind of better fit the medium, because I was a little bit scared of muddying up the nibs of the brush tips, because I did not want to paint wet on wet at all. I know a lot of people would like to, and you probably definitely can do that as long as you maybe clean your marker after, or you don't mind it having a little bit of other color residue from previous markers. But for me, I was definitely keeping everything cell shaded and very separated by colors and kind of blocking things in a particular way. So if you can, try it on different surfaces: glass, wood, other types of paper, cardboard, whatever you have available. It'll be nice to kind of test out. Oh, also, when I was doing kind of like laying out the colors, I tend to leave a gap between some of my colors, because I left it so I have indication of knowing where I was going to put the line work. Because if I color the entire area first, then I have no reference point to where my original sketch was, and I wouldn't know exactly where to place my lines. So that's kind of how I section them off. But if there's no lines in between, I'll just basically put the colors side by side. So this is Fremini. I did take inspiration from seeing some of the stuff on Pinterest of the red and blue drawings that I've been seeing from other videos as well that I talked about. So that's kind of where I was pulling this color palette from, basically. And I think it looks kind of cute. I definitely think I like the Ike one more, but I also think the color palette's a little bit more suited to my taste. The one of Hua Hua, I am not going to show the footage of, just because I don't like this piece at all. And I haven't really used the metallic markers at all yet. So let's go ahead and use this Hua Hua painting and use the acrylic markers here. So I'm using my swatches to kind of find colors that I think are going to better suit the palette. Now, I love metallic markers, but I never know how to use them, because I use them mostly for like embellishments or small details, but I think it'd be kind of fun to do something on dark paper, and I kind of have an idea now that I think about it. So I'm gonna go dig around to see if I have any dark construction paper or anything like that, or I'm gonna whip out some paint and go paint a canvas board completely black, so we can use these acrylic markers in a different session on a completely black surface or on a predetermined color. We'll see what I'm gonna do, but you can see the gold kind of shimmers here and there. I don't think my camera could capture it very well, but it kind of fits the piece a little bit, just because it kind of works for the little wisps and the little details that are floating by. Oh, right. Last thing I wanted to show you guys. So I wanted to show you guys that you can use these markers also to cover up bleed through. I have a few spreads in my sketchbook which are basically just all alcohol markers, and it has a lot of bleed through, so I'm using the Simp Tap markers to cover it up. Now you're seeing on the mostly left side of Maseki is a little bit more watered down. I had a little bit of a accident with the marker, and I accidentally pulled off the front part of the marker right off of the barrel, which caused the marker to kind of leak out, and because of that I had to go wash the marker. And I was trying my best to not get the nib too wet or anything, but because I did, it kind of watered down the paint just a little bit. But you can see after a few uses, it kind of reverts back to the acrylic paint consistency that we are more used to. But after that, I took the black marker to kind of do a little bit of detailing, and yeah, I just think this is just great coverage. It's very easy to carry around, and I feel like it's a little bit more mess free as long as you're not stupid like me and rip off the cap. Yeah, I feel like these are very portable, so I'll definitely use them a lot more in the future. But thank you again to Arrtx for sending me these lovely products for me to try out. So if you guys are interested in any of these, I'll leave all the links in the description. And yeah, I'll do one last overview of the paintings that we did today. And I'll see you guys maybe on Monday. If not, I'll see you guys on Wednesday in the new year. Bye!